Welcome to the Explainer. We've all seen it happen. Some tech tools completely transform a classroom, while others, well, they just end up being an incredibly expensive distraction. So today, we're going to demystify the core pedagogical theories behind educational technology. Our ultimate goal here is to really evaluate digital tools for their instructional potential and equip you with some actionable frameworks so you can plan instructional activities for incredibly diverse learning populations. We're talking about fostering true, independent learning. So let's just jump right in.
Here is our game plan for today. We're going to cover the foundations of learning, look at a few frameworks for tech integration, and finally, evaluate some specific digital tools.
All right, Section 1, the foundations of learning, or the why behind educational technology.
To effectively integrate technology, we first have to understand how the brain actually learns and processes information, right? So starting with thinkers like Skinner and Pavlov, and yes, we're talking about the ringing bells and the drooling dogs here, we have behaviorism. This theory essentially sees the learner as passive, just reacting to environmental stimuli. Learning is literally defined as a measurable change in outward behavior. So in the ed-tech world, technology serves to trigger and reinforce that behavior through immediate positive or negative reinforcement. Think of your classic drill and practice software, where a student gets a shiny digital badge for clicking the correct answer.
But then we move on to theorists like Brunner and Gagné, and we find cognitivism. This was a massive shift away from just looking at outward behavior. Now we're thinking of the human brain like a highly complex computer processor. It's all about those unseen internal connections. In this model, digital media is incredibly valuable because it provides rich information and virtual experiences for the brain to internally process, organize, and store.
Building right on top of that, we have Jean Piaget's constructivism, which dramatically shifts the power dynamic in the room. Students shouldn't just be passively consuming facts. Instead, digital resources allow them to foster independent learning. They are actively building their own interpretations of the world around them through hands-on problem-solving and real-world discovery based on their own unique experiences. It's a total game changer.
And finally, Seymour Papert, who is actually a pupil of Piaget, developed constructionism. If you're familiar with the modern maker movement, this aligns perfectly with that. Papert argued that new learning is most effective when students actually construct a meaningful product. So, digital tools are best used when learners can create and share visible evidence of their learning with a real audience. It shifts them completely from passive consumers to active creators.
Moving on to Section 2, frameworks for tech integration, which is really the how of instructional design. So, how do we actually bridge all these abstract theories into practical, everyday lesson plans? Well, to avoid using tech just for the sake of using tech, every successful lesson has to marry two distinct sets of standards. On one side, you've got your subject-based content standards, like math, science, or English. But on the other side, you need skill-based technology standards, like those from ISTE, which spell out the exact future-focused skills learners need. When you combine those two, boom, you get an incredibly powerful technology-enriched content objective. This brings us to Dr. Ruben Pointedora's SAMR model, which is an absolutely vital framework for evaluating how deeply you're integrating tech. It's basically a roadmap. At the very bottom, you have substitution, literally just swapping a piece of paper for a screen with zero functional change. Next up is augmentation, where you add a bit of a functional improvement. Then we cross the line into actual transformation, with modification, where the task itself gets significantly redesigned. And finally, at the very top, we reach redefinition. This is the sweet spot, where we use technology to create entirely new, incredible tasks that were previously inconceivable. Let's look at what redefinition actually looks like in practice, because it's super cool. Instead of just handing out an isolated math worksheet to practice coordinate planes, students can engage in a real-world scenario. They can work in collaborative teams as actual reef designers. They use coordinate planes and digital mapping tools to locate real offshore spots, to sink decommissioned naval boats, and create artificial coral reefs. I mean, that is real-world application that simply wouldn't be possible or nearly as impactful without the technology.
Now, if reaching that redefinition tier is your goal, how do you actually go about building the lesson? That brings us to ASSURE. It's an acronym representing a 6-step instructional design model, engineered to produce highly effective teaching and learning. Think of it as your ultimate blueprint for planning. The A in ASSURE stands for Analyze Learners, and this reminds us that accommodating incredibly diverse learning populations is absolutely critical. Before you even touch a piece of technology, you've got to identify your students' unique demographics, any mental or physical disabilities, their cultural backgrounds, and the distinct learning styles, whether they're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic learners. Basically, you have to know your audience inside and out.
The remaining steps complete your roadmap. You state your objectives using both content and text standards, you select your specific digital methods and media, then you utilize the materials using what's called the 5 Ps: previewing the media, preparing the environment, and preparing the learners. Crucially, you require learner participation to guarantee active engagement. And finally, you evaluate. Did the technology have actual assessment potential? Did student performance genuinely improve, or was it just a shiny distraction?
Okay, Section 3. Evaluating digital tools. The what of classroom application.
With a rock-solid theoretical plan via the Assure model in your back pocket, you're inevitably going to face an absolute ocean of applications. So how do you actually choose the right tool? Well, the secret is to critically evaluate which specific platform perfectly aligns with the pedagogical strategies you're trying to implement. Are you going for direct instruction, product-based learning? Let's break down a few key categories.
If your goal is constructionism, that product-based learning we talked about, storytelling and creation apps are going to be your best friends. These empower your learners to build authentic, shareable artifacts. Tools like Storybird let students create gorgeous visual stories from professional artwork. Storyboard, that is fantastic for graphic organizers and comics. Powtoon gives them intuitive animation software, and Canva provides professional-level graphic design that really makes students feel like real-world creators.
On the flip side, sometimes your primary goal is to instantly measure skill mastery. For evaluating student progress, assessment tools are incredible. Kahoot turns learning into a highly engaging, high-energy game-based trivia competition. Platforms like Formative and Socrative provide real-time results monitoring, meaning you can literally pivot your instruction on the fly based on actual data. It takes all the guesswork out of the classroom, and hey, it saves you from grading paper quizzes all day Sunday.
And for deeply immersive, student-centered discovery learning, we have interactive tools. Google Earth lets students explore the underwater topography of the oceans in full 3D. A game like Minecraft drops students into virtual worlds where they foster independent learning, tackling really complex concepts like trial and error and strategic planning without even realizing they're being assessed. And tools like Flipgrid allow for rich, asynchronous video discussions to give absolutely every single student a voice.
So, we've covered the why, the how, and the what. As you step back and look at your own curriculum, I want to leave you with this one challenge. How will you push your very next lesson to the redefinition tier? Don't just substitute old methods with new screens. How are you going to use these tools to entirely redefine what your learners can achieve?